start by saying very quickly a little bit about Ireland. It's the island I come from. It is a small island off the coast of Europe. Some of you have been there. Some of you are rather fond of the place. It's well worth a visit. All of you young people down the back, please come to Dublin at some stage at least. See the place. It's wonderful. It's not just all rocks. Those of you who are Star Wars fans, any Star Wars fans? Yes? No? Okay. You will see Skellig Michael, which is where Luke Skywalker was hiding. That's just off the coast of Ireland. It is also a very cosmopolitan city. We're a very diverse culture. And it is a very technological city. We spend a lot of time thinking and working with technology. It's probably one of the smallest digital islands in the world. Every major digital presence in the new infrastructure, people like Google, PayPal and so on, they have all opened major offices in Dublin. So approximately 800,000 people work for technology companies in and around the Dublin area. We spend a lot of time thinking about technology and how it can mess up education. This is our Minister for Education. He wanted to be the Minister for Finance. It is not a good combination when the person who wants to be the Minister for Finance is made the Minister for Education. But so far he's not doing too bad a job. Ireland has been described as a small, open economy. We are probably the second most globalised economy in the world. We depend massively on foreign trade and mostly in the digital sphere. Our teachers are on the streets for the first time in 20 and 30 years, protesting. They are protesting about reforms, they are protesting about changes, they are protesting about salary issues, so it is not a perfect island in many ways. I think all of their protests are legitimate because they are all in the interest of the system and of the children. But generally speaking, our teachers are well paid, they are very well qualified, and they tend to be very professional. We have had an all-graduate teaching profession at both primary and secondary level since the early 70s. The challenges we face in Ireland are the challenges that are faced by education systems all over the world. The problem of politicisation, politicians deciding that they know more about education than education experts, the creeping presence of managerialism, where managers know better than the people that they're working with, and then the deregulation and re-regulation debates that you see all over the world, many of them connected with standards, many of them connected with controlling teaching, controlling the profession. We have had a major series of reforms at the institutional level, so some of these faces would be familiar to some of you. They were all mentioned actually as part of the conference at various stages. So basically our teacher education system is also changing. We are restructuring. This will sound familiar to people in Kasan, the bringing together of institutions and colleges with classic universities. We are seeing exactly the same thing happening in our country. We are seeing the arrival of what we call the Teaching Council, a group that are responsible for registering and controlling entry to teaching and standards within the profession. So basically that's the background against which I'm speaking. I think I might have something to say to the Russian context, but I would not assume to say everything. You have a very unique and challenging circumstance to work within. So I thought today I would speak to three areas in particular. I thought I'd talk a little bit about research and complexity, because at heart I'm a researcher. I thought I'd speak a little bit about the question of discourse on teacher education and education reform, and I thought I'd speak a little bit about policy making and the professional education community. So those are my three touchstones for the rest of the session. I have a short video which we're now going to try and play. This is about complexity. Have a look for 2 to 3 minutes and see what you think.
Come un pazzo grida
There's more, but I'm going to stop it there. I'd like to move the slide on. What just happened there? And what on earth has it got to do with teachers and teacher education and education reform? I think it has just about everything to do with teachers and teacher education and teacher education reform. Because when we look at something like that, the question we ask is, how do we begin to understand it? And the answer is, we deal with complexity. We deal with groups of people, their roles. We deal with what is expected of them, what they do because they have always done these things. We deal with how they respond to change, to the challenge of the new, how the old birds react to the young acrobats as they come on board, how the old stagers in a system respond to the new voices, the new challenges. We look at expertise that is deceptive. To be a clown at that level, you have to go to university. Interestingly, the clowns that are used in Cirque du Soleil, does anyone know where they train mostly? The Moscow State Circus. Most of the clowns in Cirque du Soleil have actually trained to university level in their skill. So it's about skills, it's about ability, it's about bringing it all together to make something wonderful happen. And trying to research that level of complexity is what we do when we try to research teachers and teacher education. There are the power brokers, the individuals, the people that lead, the fleurs of this world, the people that inspire, the white ladies of this world. And they all have stories to tell. My challenge when I do research is to understand structures, situations, circumstances, and to try to tell stories from those environments that will connect with the students I work with. So really, if you're to look at something like Cirque du Soleil, and if you're to look at research generally, you're looking at people doing what they do within systems and within structures. You're looking at people as agents, you're looking at actions, you're looking at institutional settings, and you're trying to tell meaningful stories from those contexts in ways that reach and touch and encourage others. So that's what I think good, complex research is about. An awful lot of it comes down to this idea of discourse. Not just any version of discourse, a particularly strong version of discourse that is critical and diachronic, that looks at something and brings your professional vision, your view, your hopes, your expectations. Okay? You go on the expedition. You bring people with you. All right? There's the diachronic element as well. There's the element that takes in time, because all of this takes time. You cannot do it overnight. Despite throwing money or anything at it, it needs time. And again, myself and Elena Revikina are doing some work in this area. Elena spoke about it earlier at the conference. So discourse and teacher education reform embodies a particular version of discourse. It's about meaning and social relationships. It's about subjectivity and power relations. It's about what Stephen Ball has described as long ago as 1990 as the idea that discourses are practices that are systematically at the base and form the objects of which they speak. So the practice constructs the reality constructs the practice. And Stephen Ball particularly has written in that space there. Discourse in Besta's term, I can never get the, perhaps you can correct me, how do we say it? Gert Besta or Bert Biesta? Besta? Close enough, okay. So Besta has come up with this understanding of discourse where he talks about the problem of the hegemonic. If we all start thinking the same way, the thinking is monopolized. There is only one correct answer. That is a huge problem, okay, because it reduces things, it brings uniformity, it reduces the diversity in thought, and it causes problems for the system as we go forward. At the opening keynote, the first day of the conference, there were a number of points that really caught my attention that I thought were fascinating. The first is about the four paradigms, and Sahlberg's germ, transformative activity and so on, the teacher as the extended professional and researcher. All of these ideas have been around for a long time, but I think now, in the Russian context, they're profoundly important. And I was delighted to see Ian bringing them into the frame at the start. Professor Isaac Fruman made some fascinating comments about schools, and the point that stuck with me was what he said: schools exist and work in an unequal society. Fact. Okay? Our job is to try and not make it more unequal. Okay? We are catalysts. As educators, we give people hope, we give them vision, we give them skills, we give them capabilities, and we push them forward. It's anything but human capital. It's human capital in balance. And then Theo Vogels talked about linking theory to practice. He talked about the power of realistic pedagogies. We need to think for our students in terms of these realistic pedagogies, the pedagogies that make sense in their worlds, not in some theoretical world of our own understanding. And the importance of getting the first 10 minutes right when students walk into classrooms. He talked also about the challenge of getting it wrong, and he spoke about getting it wrong for 10, 20 years and then having to rebalance. That's a challenge always in the system. So there are marked tensions between what teachers and the academy, the university, see as professional values, okay, and what, I'm watching my time here, and what many policymakers see as the problem. These values are driven by policy interests, and they're not native to education. And I've spoken a little bit about this last year at the conference, where I spoke about these new forms of creativity that are being pushed at us, with the emphasis on the economic, the emphasis on the technological. I talked about the fact that technology is very often put forward as a solution, but it's not. Technology is at best part of the solution, because what is happening increasingly is tech shaming. Do you give your students this wonderful environment where they can all work in small groups and draw on the walls? And if you do not, you are doing something wrong. There's an element of this blame creeping into the discourse, which is very damaging to what we do as professionals and why we do what we do. There is a place for this, but it's only a small part of what we do. It should not dominate and drive. What can I say? This says legions about children, technology, and the world within which they live. It's one of the finest paintings in the world, and they're all sitting around playing with their iPhones and stuff. But anyway, standards as solutions? No. No. Standards as part of the solution? Yes. Because in so many ways we are more than the test score, we are more than the standards, we are more than the basics. We need to have values, we need to have morality driven into our system in a way that is not always embedded into standard systems. And some colleagues from the Netherlands were speaking at part of the conference earlier, they spoke about how they deal with this by adding one extra competency area, at least, to the government schedule, where they say, okay, that's all important, but we as teacher educators think that morality and values are equally important, so we're putting that in. And I think that was a very, very strong move and a clear indication of the kind of thing teacher educators should be doing. Okay? The European Union is standards obsessed. This is the next standard that is just now being developed. It's about using technology in teaching and learning. You can be an A1, A2, A, B1, B2. So all the way from a novice to an expert. And these are the fields that you're supposed to be technically capable in. Very reductionist. Yes, it's important, but there's much more to say. It's about values, capabilities, and opportunities. And I think as teacher educators, we need to understand that, and we need to operate in that space. And as young teachers going out into the world, you need to understand this also, because this is the world that you will have to operate in for the next 20 or 30 years. Russia, in many ways, is a living laboratory in relation to radical teacher education reform at the moment. It is a fascinating place to look at from the outside. I'm sure it is a fascinating experience to live in many ways, and I'm sure it has incredible challenges associated with it. The level of structural change and conceptual change that you are dealing with as a profession in the Federation is phenomenal. I don't need to tell you that. I think you can get a sense of how large it is. This particular project, the 5 in 100 project, which Kasan is a member of, is making a big impression in so many ways. It's changing how teaching is seen and viewed. I commend and I compliment the people here in Kasan for the decision to hold on to the classical as well as the new. And I'll explain why in a few minutes' time. An awful lot of the discourses that we're dealing with have their external origins. They come from the OECD, the World Bank, and people like that. Some of them are internal and political. I won't kind of deal with those. They're kind of problematic everywhere. How do we build on that understanding? Well, we give voice to professional values and relationships. Talk to teachers. Talk with teachers. Listen to teachers. Capture their stories. Help them understand what's going on in their world. Think in terms of agentive force, how you can be an agent for change, how you can be the change you want to see happening. Document the institutional forces that are at work. Look at the policy papers, look at the documents, be critical of them, but look for the positives as well. Engage with the policy motives. This is a picture that I put up last year at this particular forum. I talked about the sailor, the ship, and the sea lane. And I talked about the power of this 2,000-year-old type ship sailing into a modern harbour. Because really, that's what we do. We deal with students. We deal with the university. We deal with the system. We deal with the sailors, the ships, and the sea lanes. Slavov Zizek, one of my kind of touchstones in recent times, his challenge is, if you really want to do something new, you must not lose sight of the power of the past and the value of what we've done in the past. That is equally important. So to really have something new, you have to be faithful to some of the old. Pasi Sahlberg has said it beautifully also. He talks about reforming schools as a complex, slow process. To rush it is to ruin it. I would say the same thing is true for teacher education. Reforming teacher education is a slow, steady process over 10, 15, 20 years. You can rush the first part, but then you have to slow down and figure out what's happening around you. And I'd leave the final word with a well-known local educator in relation to this. It is very important that we do not lose sight of the humanistic value. It is very important that we do not lose this understanding of the dialogical relation between the teacher and those that we teach or work with, those who become our colleagues, those that we actually work with as students. Okay? Rose's comment yesterday at her keynote in relation to the child as a person who has absolute value independent of their state behaviour or feeling, I think that is equally true of teachers. I think every teacher has their value. We should not dismiss teachers because they are not as good as we would like them to be. It is a powerful statement that we make when we say that this is important to teacher education in the world. This is you, just in time. Perfect time. Thank you. That's my message. It's short, it's sweet. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention, and I thank Professor Vileva for her invitation to speak to this conference. And I think for once in my life, I'm actually within my time frame. Thank you.